thing. Analytics.
Beans.
Beans. Me and the boys at 2 a.m. looking
2
for
a.m.
beans.
looking for beans.
Beans. What are your favorite kind of beans or method of bean preparation?
Favorite kind of beans are probably black beans. And growing up, like the black beans at this place called El Pollo Loco, the burrito place. It's like
Okay.
it's burrito chain. Sorry, it's a chicken place. They make burritos too, but like their whole thing is chicken and only chicken. And they used to flavor the beans like they were the best black beans ever. And I think they just like took all the chicken fat and put them in the beans, and then also I
Hell
think they added
yeah.
sugar to it and made them sweet.
Go.
But they were like sweet and smoky and like just really really solid. And then recently they're not as good. I don't know what they changed, but
Cutting corners now.
I think so.
Shaving things.
Those dang
Sebastian, hello. Um, you can ask questions in the chat. We don't have a ton of questions already prepared, so we're talking about beans to start off, which is a
when in
very
doubt,
important
talk
question.
about beans.
When in doubt, talk about beans. So yeah, if you want to ask your question, feel free just to put it in chat. We will likely get to it. I need chicken fat is their response. Um,
Dude, chicken fat is great. It is a great cooking material. It makes everything taste better.
it does. It's top tier. I don't use it enough, but that's one of the reasons that chicken soup, like made with the whole chicken and all the fat and stuff, is just so good.
Yeah,
It's so good. Oh, the question is, how many hugs do the Refold staff need?
all of them.
Yes, this is my cute cat. His name is Kenkibre, and he is adorable.
Mm-hmm.
He is just chilling. He's
I
hanging
just
out.
heard my dog Noodle stomping around. So
Maybe we'll get a noodle visit today.
I mean the door's not open, so no.
We will not get a noodle visit. That's too bad.
No.
The noodle. That's a very cute name. All right, you want to jump into real questions or continue talking about beans?
Well, let's get 5 more minutes. I mean, we don't specifically have to talk about beans, but what is your
Um,
favorite kind of bean?
I don't know, but I think like black-eyed peas always stick out in my mind because we
Okay.
would do the New Year tradition of eating black-eyed peas on New Year's, and
Did not know that was a tradition.
maybe it was a made-up thing. I don't know if it's real, but in my mind, it's a New Year's tradition,
Yeah.
and usually it's sort of a black-eyed pea stew. Yeah, that's the phrase, and I don't think I started out liking it as a kid, but I grew to like it because it is just good. And I think at some point my parents started using more bacon fat or
Mm.
just bacon, which makes it good. So, um, but then also, yeah, black beans, super solid. Um, frijoles charros also are very good. I made some of those a couple weeks ago. I took a cooking class and we made michiotes and frijolitos to go with it, and they were really, really good. And the secret of that one is a bunch of manteca, which
Nice.
is also just lard. So fat makes everything better, I guess.
Suppose so.
Pinto beans are another good one.
Yeah,
That's a
pinto
good one.
beans never really did it for me.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's too bad.
I like always prefer black beans over pinto beans.
I think I probably do too.
Yeah. I think kidney beans are also pretty good.
hmm That's what I think I do chili with typically
Mm-hmm.
if I can, or else I'll just do black beans. But I like a good pinto bean. Anywho,
What a weird way to start the stream.
what a weird way to start the stream. Bean stream.
Bean stream.
We're gonna transition. Oh, we forgot about like string beans, snap peas, or snap peas beans.
No.
I said that in the sentence, but then yeah, I don't think they are. But string beans are good. Green beans. Oh, is it the same thing?
I don't know. Aren't peanuts technically beans?
They're legumes, and beans are legumes, so maybe? Anybody a bean expert
Expert?
chat?
Beanologist?
Uh, I don't know.
Freehologist?
A human bean? Huh? A human bean? Coffee beans! We forgot about coffee! I love coffee.
Are coffee beans actually beans, though?
Yeah. I think so.
I don't know.
Why else would we say coffee bean?
I mean, all sorts of reasons. We say all sorts of weird
Good
stuff.
point.
Language is super weird.
They're very weird.
We call peanuts nuts, even though they're not nuts.
Oh, nuts. All right, I'm reading the chat. We're getting baked beans in here with mustard and
Ooh,
maple
baked beans are
syrup.
good.
Baked beans are very good. We also get a very reasonable comment from Brian saying that the stream would be better if the cat was full screened. Um, and
We need
then
a separate camera for the cat.
a lot of like real streamers, full-time streamers, do have things like that.
Yeah.
Full on just cat cam, and it's just the cat on screen sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into some language learning questions before we.
You don't want to just keep talking about beans?
No, we could. I guess I wouldn't really.
It's December, right? Like, it's the holiday season. Nobody wants to do podcasts.
So speaking of which, how do I sentence mine? So this question is actually it's kind of we've split up the question. It's from Electo because they ask kind of a bunch of sub questions.
Yep.
But they are feeling like they're potentially doing a bit too much. They're kind of doing overkill with their sentence mining.
Sure.
And they want to know how much you should look up. What do you do if you don't know more than one word? How many things should you add to Anki per day? Definitely a little bit of nervousness. So the first thing I'd say is like, you're probably fine. I said relax with it a little bit.
Nope, if you don't do it perfectly, you'll never learn the language.
Fair enough. Next question.
Should I not joke about that? I don't know.
Probably not. No.
All right, fair enough. People take it too seriously.
Yeah. But what would you say for sentence mining? How much is a good amount? What is a good feeling for how many words you're looking up? How hard it should be? How long it should take? That's another question I saw earlier today. Was also somebody's like, I'm taking XYZ minutes to do a 15-minute episode or something like that. It's like, what is too long? What is too much?
Yeah. All right. So, and the first thing is sort of just a general awareness is that anything that's important to learn in a language will come up again. So you don't need to learn it the first time you see it. In fact, you won't learn it the first time you see it. And if it's important, it will come up again. If it doesn't come up again, it wasn't important. So you don't need to be saving every single possible word or sentence that you don't know or don't understand. That is definitely overkill. Now, the amount that you do end up saving is very dependent on you, because some people really enjoy the process of creating and studying cards, and other people absolutely hate it. So, general rule of thumb is about 10 new things a day is about how much you can really learn and retain. And those new things can be new words or new senses of those words used in specific sentences or new grammar patterns. But in terms of like sitting down and actually studying a set of things, 10 new words a day is pretty good and will get you into a good rhythm that as long as you keep doing that, you will eventually reach the goal. If you are doing an enormous amount of immersion, like 8 hours a day, definitely like above 10 is fine. But for 1-2 hours a day, 10 is sort of where you should be maximum.
For normal people.
Yeah. for normal people.
10 is a good number.
I actually like 7 is my happy place. Like 7 new things a day is sort of where it's not too stressful, but it's still challenging. That's where I try to sit. Now, in terms of
for a really long time,
yeah,
8 new cards a day, 8 new mind things.
yeah, and if you find yourself like really burning out, drop it down. Like drop it down to nothing until it becomes easier, and then like increase it slowly again. Don't worry about trying to always be at 10. And on bad days where just like I just don't really feel like doing this, like turn off new cards and just do the reviews. That's fine too. We're really aiming for sustainability. You don't want to push yourself ridiculously hard on a day where you don't have the energy and burn out and then not do it going forward. All right. And then there's a question of how do you actually do sentence mining? And there's a bunch of different ways. There's synchronous sentence mining where you have tooling or you're just copying and pasting, and that is creating cards as you're immersing. That process, the tools are getting pretty good nowadays where you can see something, look it up, make a card from it in a matter of seconds, honestly. So if you've got all the nice tools set up, then getting your 10 a day should not be an issue. If you don't have the tool set up and you're just like copying and pasting into Anki, that's also fine. Like you don't need to have super fancy tools enabled. It just might be a little bit more annoying or a little bit more effort. And then I think what I was sort of picking up in the subtext of the question and with what you said is that people are thinking about the time that intensive immersion takes. Or interactive immersion. And sentence mining is a form of interactive immersion, right? You're sitting down, you're looking things up, you're creating cards. And this, again, kind of relies on the individual, but it definitely takes longer than just, free flow. And so the question is, how much time should it be taking? We generally recommend between 3 and 5 times as long. So a 10-minute piece of content should take you 30 minutes to 50 minutes. That's what you should be aiming for. If you find that it goes substantially longer than that, then you are being a perfectionist, and you don't need to be a perfectionist with this. It is
or the
okay
content's way too hard.
Or the content's way too hard. Exactly. If you're coming across sentences where you don't know any of the words and you're trying to look all of them up, that's not a good use of your time. We definitely want to aim for sentences where you only know or you're only missing one piece of the information to understand the whole thing. That's really where the target, where we want to target your level.
And if you're sentence mining, your interactive immersion is taking just a little bit longer than the runtime, then it's probably way too easy, and you're not really pushing yourself out of that comfort zone to get the benefit of sentence mining.
Yeah. So like if you're only looking like one word up every, 5 minutes, that's definitely too easy for you to be doing intensive immersion with. Like that's basically just free flow.
Yeah.
At that point. You can still sentence mine during that though. And I've absolutely done that. Yeah. So that's a much more relaxing thing. So if you're finding that sentence mining is super stressful, you may just be using content that's too hard. And if you may do easier content, then it stops being as stressful.
Yeah. Good. I think we had enough in that question there. Let's.
Oh, and then one other thing is there is another type of sentence mining, which is asynchronous, which is what I do, because I don't actually really like creating cards while I'm immersing. I just like to immerse. So what I'll do is I'll just mark everything that I don't know as I go through, and then I'll do another pass and go through all the things that I marked as unknown and do the sentence mining then.
Cool. Well, thank you for the question. The next one here is, that's the same one. This one, which has to do with a good schedule for a beginner. What are the kinds of activities and things that you would recommend for somebody that's new to language learning do every single day?
Promo for our course. We talk about all those things in the teacher's level language course. That's basically what it's structured for. It's a couple different categories. And again, the exact balance between those categories will be dependent on the learner and their level. But if you're like brand new to it, there's the big thing, which is vocabulary acquisition. And then there is smaller categories of sound study and grammar study. But what we focus on is reading comprehension as kind of the fundamental skill in the first skill that you're tackling, and that requires the acquisition of vocabulary, some acquisition of grammar, though at a lower amount. Obviously, reading the written phonetic writing system. So, with something like Japanese, hiragana and katakana, that's your focus. Don't try to learn kanji until you've nailed the kana. Then there's sound study that comes in at some point. You can choose to do that or not, depending on what your priorities are. And then there's immersion, and there's different types. So there's the immersion where you're just like letting it wash over you, free flow, or immersion where you're sitting and actually doing something, looking things up, etc. So in terms of the balance between all of those things, the way that I would structure it if I was learning a new language, which I should probably start doing soon, is I would start my day with my Anki review, my vocab study, because that's what I hate the most. And so doing it first thing in the morning for 15 minutes is probably the best way for me to make it happen. Then I would do the more interactive immersion, sitting, looking things up, noticing words, trying to understand sentences, because that's a mentally intensive exercise. So again, putting that relatively early in the day.
And how much
One,
time would you spend there?
yeah. So if you're brand new to language learning, like you probably only want to be putting in an hour total when you're first getting started, because it's a pretty significant mental exercise.
Mm-hmm.
The only caveat to that is if you are really trying to go at it hard, like when I first started studying Spanish, I literally took a week off work and just dedicated my entire time to that. So that's a special case. If you're planning to put in, 5, 6, 8 hours a day, then this does not apply to you. But if you're a beginner and this is your first time learning a language and you have other responsibilities like work, etc., starting with an hour is a great place to start. In terms of breakdown of that hour, I would say 15 minutes of Anki, 30 minutes of interactive, maybe less if it's very difficult or you hate it. I personally love interactive, so it's like my favorite activity, so doing half an hour is not a problem for me. And then the remainder is free flow. So there's another 15 minutes of free flow, and you can do as much free flow as you want. That's something that's very straightforward for most people.
I would also add in though that free flow should be very easy. It should be
Yeah.
it should not, like, you should be doing ideally comprehensible input, very basic things that you can follow along and understand.
Yeah.
There was a conversation a couple days ago in Refold Central about, are you just trying to let things wash over you and you're trying to absorb stuff, or you have to be understanding the messages and the things behind the language? And that is the thing. If you're just hearing the language and not following anything, you're not really learning. You have to be actually understanding what's happening, even if you're understanding via images and gestures and tone of voice and that kind of thing. That is still understanding, and that will lead to more specific, like, word level understanding. But if you're just staring at the screen, that's not learning. You're just staring at the screen.
Yeah, you need to be able to pay attention to it. You need to be able to pick out words. And if you can understand meaning and messages, that is also a really important factor to acquisition. It's a lot to ask for someone on day one to understand anything at all. So
Yeah, that's why doing things that you know well, or really comprehensible input, very basic level stuff, is very powerful, even though it's
yeah,
kind of boring.
yeah. And I think in week 3 of our course, we actually have here's a menu of all the different techniques you can do to artificially improve your comprehension. And that's it. It's for that exact reason. So when you're getting started, anything that you can do to help you understand that is apart from the language itself is also really beneficial for giving you the context to start recognizing words more effectively.
Yeah. Cool.
So an hour a day, 15 minutes Anki, 30 minutes interactive, 15 minutes free flow is like a good combo.
So when are you going to start learning a new language?
I don't know. 2025?
That's 25 days away.
I know.
27.
I hadn't really thought about it, but yeah, it's been on my to-do list for a while. So,
What would you learn?
all right, Hebrew's been on my list.
That's not an answer though.
I'm gonna
Hebrew
start learning Hebrew.
English. There we go. I love it. Um, so another question here has been actually on the list for a while, but Kale Chips asked, "Does Refold have any plans to connect users in real life and not just online?" I've mentioned in a couple of videos the loneliness epidemic and things that are happening in the world as we're being more fragmented and splintered, and I think it'd be really cool.
I think so too. I'd love to do in-person meetups. That's actually that idea has been bouncing around for years now. But you do have to have a pretty sizable community to
Mhm.
make that happen, especially if you want to get refolders of like the same language.
Right.
So, and it's also just a completely different organizational model. You have to have
Mhm.
people facilitate and organize and set up the events, and it's more work than you would expect it to be. Especially if you want the meetup to be consistent and grow. Like the
Right.
Spanish meetup here in San Francisco, during the pandemic, nearly all of the language meetups died, except for one, and it's the one that's been around for 11 years, every single week. And the organizers of that one show up every single week to make it happen. So that's a big commitment, and given that our team is very spread out all over the world, and I'm about to go nomadic again, it's not super easy to get that working unless we sort of get like a volunteer core to start organizing those meetups and
Mhm.
events.
A couple of us have met up. I have met I think just one person from the Spanish server in real life, and but then also like Mr. Salas and Lamont.
Oh yeah,
So that's like not really the same thing because
yeah.
we agreed to sort of meet up and travel together or to travel to the same place.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it'd be really cool. Next year, somebody told me about the Polyglot Gathering because it happens to be in Prague, which is where they speak Czech. And it also happens to be at the time that I'm planning to go to the Czech Republic. So 2 years after I started learning, when I'm going to be making some videos. And so I might go to that, which would be kind of fun. And obviously, it's not a Refold meetup, but it could be we could piggyback off of some kind of language meetup for a while to see if there's any interest in something. But yeah, I think there's a lot of value to in-person stuff, especially since languages are about human connection, which is hard over the internet sometimes.
Absolutely. No, I'd love it if there was. I would love it if we could create that meetup on a regular basis. I just think it it's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, we love work.
We
Um,
do. We just got a lot of it already.
Thanks for the question, Kale Chips. Another question here, speaking of work, is how do you jump in after a long break? And we've answered this question actually a couple of different times, various phrasings. We have actually, there's a YouTube clip of it, getting back on the language learning train or something like that.
Hmm.
But I put it on this list this time because I wanted to talk about me jumping back in to German after a multi-year break. I don't think I've really used German in over 5 years for sure. Um, and I jumped in again. I'm making a video working with Mr. Solis, and we're both sort of retaking up German, tracking it with the Refold app and everything. And it's been a cool experience. I've been doing an hour a day, doing relatively simple things. I've just been going through the entire DE1K Anki deck just to sort of review vocab. I'm suspending everything that I know, and I'm doing like 20 words a day. I'm already halfway through the deck.
Hmm.
And I know pretty much everything that well, not pretty much. I know most of the things I've come across. It's been like 10 days. So I'm going to finish it very quickly. But it's great to just be reminded of words, to see them again. And then I'm immersing for the rest of the time. I'm watching Avatar in German. because started watching it in Czech, but then seasons 2 and 3 just aren't licensed anywhere that I can access. So it's like, God, I really want to finish the show now. I was like, wait, I could do it in German. So I started doing that. That's been good for noticing words, for hearing things, and I know the story so well. And I've also been reading and listening to Harry Potter in German as well, which has also been great because, again, I know the story really well. I'm following along. And I know most of the words. Like, I remember more German than I thought. I know most of the words I can, and pretty much every word that I don't know, I either know from it being a cognate or from context or just knowing Harry Potter so well that I'm just like, I know exactly what that sentence says.
Yeah.
And so it's been really cool. And I think the focus there is that I'm doing stuff to kind of get back into the flow of things and taking it easy. And then I'm going to bump it up and actually try to improve my skills after I've taken it at least a couple of weeks of like just getting back into the flow and hearing German for a couple dozen hours and that sort of thing.
Cool beans.
Or back on the beans question? Bean
Apparently we
preparation?
are. Bean preparation.
So thank you for the question, for giving me a reason to talk about that. Another fun question here, another follow-up from Electo is, how many language apps is too many language apps?
For one person or in general?
For one person is their question, but if you have an opinion on how many is too many to exist.
For one person, I would generally say one app per technique/activity. You might be able to double up some activities on a single app. Like Anki can be used for a bunch of different activities if you format the cards correctly. But yeah, of all of those things that we listed out earlier, sound, phonetic, writing system, vocabulary, grammar, interactive immersion, free flow immersion, like that's 6. So one app for each of those is probably the maximum that I would ever do, and you should probably be doing even less than that. I don't think there's much value in having multiple vocabulary apps, for example.
Yeah, I like this person asked me in DMs as well, and they were like, I use Anki, Drops, and something else. Oh, it's Closemaster. I'm like, that's too many. You don't need that many. They're
You don't
serving
need
the
that.
same role.
Yeah.
And I gave the example of like, it's like you're cooking yourself a meal, and you go, I got to have protein, so I'm going to make myself chicken, steak, and beans. And it's like, you're just going to have a lot more dishes. It's going to be a lot harder. You can just make yourself one per night, or just stick to one, or whatever it is. Metaphor breaks down a bit, but you don't need that many. And
Yeah.
I often argue for simplicity. Clayton wrote a great blog article on our blog about the best language learning apps. And we go against the grain of listing Duolingo, Memrise, Closemaster. And it's like, what do you actually like? How are you spending time with the language? And so we recommend things like YouTube, the Kindle app, like things like that. And it's like, and I don't really use that many language learning tools anymore. It's mostly just like Anki, ASB player, vocab sieve for German now, Loot. Everything else
using
is like
both
just content.
Loot and vocab sieve.
Vocab sieve is for looking up stuff in ASB player.
Oh,
Loot
got it.
is a reader tool.
Got it.
But everything else is like YouTube, Netflix. That's basically it.
Yeah.
Books. Like it.
But generally,
that many tools.
if you're using Anki, Drops, and Closemaster, I would say drop 2 of them. It doesn't matter which 2. I tried Drops and didn't particularly like it. I like Closemaster probably as like my favorite of those 3 self-contained, but Anki is obviously much more flexible because you can add whatever you want into it. So it also depends on like what you're doing in the rest of your studying. If you're creating your own cards, then Anki is a better tool for that. If you're using pre-made decks and you've already done ours, or you don't want to do ours, so you want to use something that's pre-made for you, like Closemaster has everything you need. You don't need to also do Drops.
Exactly.
So that's my 2 cents.
We've got it was an interesting question from some random Japanese learner who I've never heard of before. Talks about hugs all the time.
Oh, that guy.
And yeah, where is that question? Oh, what would need to happen for Refold to stop recommending Anki? What would be the paradigm shift or the software pattern be to change our current recommendation? I think it's kind of an interesting question because a lot of people don't like Anki.
Yeah, I don't blame you. It's it can often be a mess. We're currently dealing with a problem with Anki Droid where it just like decides to not show half our cards, half
Yeah,
of
yeah.
each card rather, and it's like it's a silly little bug. I don't know what causes it, but it's oftentimes software is a tangled mess. So
Woo.
um, recommendations to or what would need to exist to stop recommending Anki. There's a model in which you don't need a flashcard system at all, really. Or if you do, it's not one in which you are uh, like creating the cards. So, and we drew up these plans like 3 years ago and just haven't built it because it's relatively complicated. Um, but I've always felt that sentence mining is kind of a backwards endeavor, right? You're learning things after you see them, when ideally you should be learning them before you see them. But guaranteeing that you see them right after you learn them is kind of the software challenge there. So if there were a tool that allowed you to do that easily, I think you could completely remove the flashcard app from that. Or if you didn't remove it, you would have it would have a much smaller role. You could also have a system in which the SRS is done naturally, where any word, like the system keeps track of your word level knowledge or your sense level knowledge and identifies opportunities for you to review those things in a natural environment rather than an artificial flashcard environment. And in either of those cases, you could avoid Anki. There's also just plenty of apps that now have flashcards built in. So, like, LingoPie has flashcards built in. Link has flashcards built in. So many of these meta layers already have the exact same behavior. I haven't really seen them to be as good as Anki, or definitely not as flexible. So some combination of a nicer, smoother experience than Anki and a dynamic nature that removes the need for the user to manually create their own cards would be required in order to kill Anki.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does serve a very useful role, and it's good enough at what it does that it's just a good recommendation
For
currently.
now.
Yeah, where none of us are thrilled with it. I mean, like I personally like it and would probably keep using it regardless, but I understand that that's not what most people feel.
Yeah, I don't feel that way. It is
What
the
would you
first one.
say?
It's the first thing to go when I start losing motivation.
And so, what would you say someone should do if they don't want to use Anki?
Don't want to use Anki. Well, I guess the question is, do you want to not use any SRS, or do you just not want to use Anki as the SRS? Because there's plenty of other SRSs out there that are nicer to use. There's also non-technical approaches like the Goldless method that Bree enjoys because she also hates Anki. So there are natural, or rather, there are analog SRSs that you can do. So in terms of finding a replacement for Anki, there are plenty. You can use Closemaster as your primary vocabulary acquisition source. You won't be able to create cards with it, I don't think, but
Vocabulary like learning source. You
sorry,
still
yes.
acquire it from the
Sorry,
immersion.
misspoke. Yes, vocabulary priming source, we'll say. And so there are other SRSs that might be preferable to Anki.
And then if you don't want to do any
Yeah,
SRS at all, the biggest thing is that you just need to be getting exposure to these new words in a way that you understand and can learn from well. So maybe
yeah,
you are doing a lot more highly comprehensible input, or you can do a lot more lookups, or just a lot of reading. Um, Ryan also often talks about copy work a lot. Bree's been really enjoying it. She actually wrote an email about it. And I'm actually going to try it on my trip. I'm kind of excited to be like, I'm not going to bring my laptop, so I'm just going to see what happens.
Okay.
Um, so copy work is basically just where you write down something, a text, and you like comprehend it. You look up the words you don't know, and then keep going. So it's sort of like a different way just to review words and go over things, but also with handwriting and physicality.
Yeah.
Um,
The
and so
physical
there's a lot
aspect
of
definitely
different
helps with memory. So,
mhm. A lot of different things you can try instead of doing an SRS. But the same main idea is that you're trying to expose yourself to the words and meanings in a like over time over and over again, because that is like the reason SRSs work is because that's kind of how the human brain learns stuff, right? It's not the other way, but it goes, okay, the spaced repetition tells our brain to keep it in the tank so that we can use that knowledge because it's like, okay, it keeps coming up, probably should just remember it.
yeah.
And so doing something that replaces that is basically what you're looking for.
Yeah. So, like, you can create an artificial SRS just by watching the same content repeatedly, right?
You could watch the
So,
same exact movie 50 times in a row if you wanted.
you can. I wouldn't recommend it, uh, but you can also narrow your focus to a domain. So, um, if you are, really interested in cooking terminology, you can watch a ton of cooking shows, and the same
Beans.
words, beans, the same words will come up over and over and over again, and that's a natural SRS.
Hmm. I mean, language is a natural SRS, right? Zipf's law means that things just come up in spaced ways.
Yep.
Anyways, um, we got a good quick question here. Where is Ethan's accent from? Um, the Oliver likes it, but and wants to practice it.
I have an accent,
Everybody's an accent.
I guess. I was born and raised in California, Southern California. So, but then I also lived in Boston
SoCal.
for 12 years, and there's a pretty strong accent there. So I might have picked up something, but
To me, you sound
um,
pretty Californian.
I think so. Yeah.
Um, yeah, Southwestern. It's one of the accents that's closest to General American, um, in terms of the features that it has. Again, not perfect, but pretty close.
There's also definitely different subcultures within Southern California with different accents and ways of
Oh
speaking.
yeah,
So
yeah.
mine
Tons
is
and tons
pretty
of accents in the
neutral, I
U.S.
think, compared to like surfer talk or valley girl.
It's more popular. It's more common rather than neutral. Um,
Yeah.
so good question there, I guess. Okay, I'm gonna go try to dig in the chat, go back a bit. Let's see. Zagoat Connor asks, I've got a question. I keep trying to decode the target language. Wait, no, I don't understand that. They asked again. Okay, how do I stop decoding and translating to English in my brain, even though English isn't my native language? It's kind of bugging me that I can't just focus on the target language.
Mm. It's natural. It's something that everybody deals with. Really, probably for the first couple hundred hours of the process. There's learning to understand the language directly is a skill, and it's also a decision. Some people just like happen to do it naturally and it's not an issue. For those of us who are more analytical, it's definitely like myself, it is a different mindset that you have to come at it with than the translation approach. So when you're translating, you are actively trying to parse everything rather than allowing your subconscious to do the work of parsing and understanding the language. So you're making it a very conscious process. Um, it When you choose to hand control to your subconscious and calm down your conscious mind and allow it to just not try and process everything that it hears.
Hang on, difficulties. Please stand by.
Are there issues? You lose me.
Yeah, I don't know if we're losing me or we're losing what's going on, but okay. I think you're good now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're
You're,
good now.
you're like jumping in and out on my end.
Sorry. I know. I don't know if it's just my internet and I'm interrupting you for no good reason, but we're good now. Continue.
Great. Um, yeah, so this isn't something that is quite easy when you're on the early side, but the approach that I took with it was to stop trying to focus on meaning at all and just focus on hearing the words and hearing the sounds. And in doing so, letting my conscious mind focus on just hearing things properly kept it pretty busy. And my subconscious was able to relatively quickly take over the responsibility of processing meaning.
Hmm.
Um, and that was, it only took a couple days for that transition to happen. Granted, I was already at a level where I had very good reading comprehension. So going from reading comprehension to listening comprehension of a piece of media like Harry Potter that I already know very well was not that challenging
Hmm.
because I already had all of the ingredients for it, and I just needed to stop my brain from processing or stop my conscious mind from focusing on the wrong things. Um, so again, depends on where you are in the process. If you're very early on, don't expect that to happen anytime soon. If you're later on and you're already able to read things pretty well, but you still are, um, you're still translating in your head, then taking an easier piece of media and training your conscious mind to just focus on the sounds and the words rather than on the meaning will allow you to cede control to your subconscious to handle the understanding of the meaning.
Hmm. And Connor, this goes for if you're translating to your native language or to English. It it's kind of the same thing, right? You have to let your subconscious take over. Um, and I found that it can be weird that you can easily turn off native language, but turning off other target languages can happen. But it's just also a matter of practice, right? Once you
Yeah.
get over the bumps and your brain kind of figures it out, it goes like, okay, yeah, these are different languages. I'll focus on this one.
Yeah.
Cool. You got the question? Oh,
Yeah. The other thing to note there is if you give yourself some opportunities to spend like a whole day or multiple whole days in the target language, that can also assist with turning off the other languages in your brain. It
mhm.
gives your brain a chance to like really convert it's just like mental processing mode over to the other language entirely for an extended period of time. And it becomes easier to get back into that state once you've done it.
Good answer. Thank you. We have a question here in Spanish from Sebastián. Hey chicos, es mejor empezar con free flow antes de hacer intensive listening. Me toma 1 hora y 30 minutos de ver 15 minutos de una serie en intensive listening. Debería ser más free flow primero. So their question has to do if they should start doing
Mm.
and practicing their free flow skills before their intensive listening skills because it takes them a very long time to get through a series with intensive listening. Um, does that mean that they're missing out by wasting time? I think is what I'm understanding there.
Wait, sorry. I didn't follow that last part.
I've seen this worry by a lot of people is that they feel like that since they're going slow through a piece of content, it means
Mm-hmm.
that they're going slow through language learning. That is not,
Oh no.
yeah.
Okay.
So
No. You
no,
want to go
you
for it?
actually want to start with more intensive and interactive immersion because free flow is easier to do but harder to get value out of. Intensive listening is harder to do but easier to get value out of. And so if you have to go really slow through a piece of content just to understand it, you can't free flow with it yet because you're going to miss everything. And so you want to start with something that's either that's easy enough that you can follow along with free flow, or find something that's at a middle level and do interactive with that. If it's taking you just forever, you probably should find something easy. But you don't like free flow isn't just a faster version of interactive. It is a very different skill and thing that you're practicing.
Also, if he's doing 15 minutes in an hour and a half, I think you said.
Yeah, which is very, very
Yeah.
slow.
Well, it's 6x, right? And we recommend
Oh,
3 to
yeah.
5.
Why did I think it was longer than that? That is only 6. Okay, that's
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah, so it's pretty normal, like a
Minus
little
1.
slow, but like it's within the range of error.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know why my math. Oh, I think I was looking at like you 15, 10 times would be 1.5, which is 1.5. That's not
Yeah.
how numbers work. um, yeah, so that actually sounds fine. Yeah, good. That's a good point. So definitely putting in time intensively is going to be helpful for your free flow later. Um, so okay, we have a question. Another question here. Um, Eamon is in sort of 2A-ish for Japanese, and actually that's the same. Should they be translating everything into English question?
Oh.
So we changed those questions. Good job. Somebody asked how long I've
It's
been
it's a little bit
studying.
of a
Oh,
different question. It's he's asking whether he should be doing it, not how to stop doing it.
that's fair. Should you be doing it?
In the beginning, it's inevitable. Like your brain doesn't have any other means of parsing meaning other than its native language.
Hmm. But you don't need if you're not doing it, you don't need to start doing it.
No, no,
Is
no.
the yeah.
Yeah.
Connor, I learned German in the past for 5-ish years, and I have a B2 diploma certificate from in 2017 or something. But I don't actually have that much time because I did a lot of um, traditional study, not a ton of immersion. I was in Germany a decent amount, a lot of speaking. Um, so I don't really have a great answer. I've restarted it like 8 days ago. Oops, that is my email, not Anki. I was going to see how many Anki days my streak is. How many days my Anki streak is. Um, yeah, a week, 9 days. So today is day number 10 of picking it back up, and yeah, it's been fun. Let's see. Um, Ola de Calor asks, hi, my question is that I've been studying Korean for the past 4 months and I really enjoy it, but many of the resources I find have English as the assumed native language of the users. Is that okay, even though my English isn't perfect?
Definitely adds a challenge. Um,
I mean, also, English isn't perfect or your English is bad. If you don't understand English, it's going to be really, really hard. But if your
yeah.
English just isn't perfect, like that's probably fine.
Yeah.
Um,
It doesn't matter.
yeah,
There
we
might be
recommend that you
certain
mostly
times where
use.
like
Oh,
there might be times when idiomatic expressions are used in conveying meaning. So if you're taking something from Korean and trying to get the same sentiment out of it, it might use an idiomatic expression from English. And if you don't know idiomatic expressions because you're not super familiar with English, that would be a pretty significant challenge. Um, but if it's more of a direct translation, then it should be less of an issue, even though you probably won't get the idiomatic meaning of it. You'll probably have to look that up.
mhm. I'll also say that while chatbots and LLMs still aren't perfect, even close to that, they are very helpful for this kind of thing, for going to
Yeah.
from basically any language to any language. And so if you don't assume that everything that they say is just always true, they're still very helpful. And so you can look things up like that. If you're like, okay, I really don't get this in English. I don't want to learn it in English. I do want to learn it in Korean. You can do something like that. Thank you for the question. Okay, here is it useful to use furigana for free flow in Japanese so that you don't have to deal with unknown readings?
Uh, if you're in the reading comprehension phase, then yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
Um, the trying to read kanji at full speed when you don't know that many kanji is essentially impossible. Um, I would save your kanji studying for interactive immersion.
Agreed. Make your free flow as easy and comprehensible as possible. don't add in extra speed bumps like kanji that are used once in 10,000 years or whatever.
Or just like if you only know a couple hundred kanji, you're not going to be able to understand most content if it's just pure kanji.
Just all kanji, just completely random kanji.
Just random kanji.
Leo asks, did I ever master adjective endings in German? I memorized basically all of the German grammar stuff because I was in classes and I'm relatively good at memorizing things. Mastered? No. I was actually okay with my sort of natural grammar use, but okay is not at even close to master. Like it was definitely still a lot of guessing and then relying on common patterns, but anything that was like trying to get out of my comfort zone is sort of just like, I'm just using a guess here. But I'll say there are way fewer than in Czech. So
Ben has been just
honestly,
complaining day in, day out about these Czech declensions.
it's so much because like at least in German they use articles, and so you can go like, oh yeah, it is it is what's a noun? Die Welt, right? It's okay, you can see it's a feminine noun from die. In Czech, there's no articles, but you have to know the gender in order to apply it to the adjective in order to make it correct, and it's just Anyways, sorry. Next question. Hi Ben and Ethan. Stop moving, chat. When you start to speak, is it normal to want to think or translate in English into your target language, even if you can understand without translating? How do you get around this?
Yeah, it is normal. Your brain's not used to thinking as Spanish as like the first language.
Or whatever your target language is.
Or yeah, sorry, Spanish. Yeah, for me it's Spanish.
Which is Spanish.
So over time it gets easier. Like, but to this day, when I start speaking Spanish, it takes me 10 to 15 minutes to like switch into Spanish mode.
Neta?
Sí, de verdad. And during that time, like
That was him switching back to English.
During that like 15-minute period, like I definitely speak slower. I definitely am not as on the ball, and like I definitely have more English coming into my head than is comfortable for Spanish speaking. But if you give yourself enough time with it, you eventually turn off that part and just switch entirely over. So, but often that takes like practicing that takes speaking in the language for like multiple hours straight. So getting into an environment in which you have an opportunity to spend like a whole day with someone speaking that language is a great way to turn off that little English voice. And then each time you do that, it becomes easier to do it in the future.
I'd also recommend watching my starting Czech output video. I think it's the most recent video in my Czech learning series, because I recorded basically all of my first conversations, and you see like how in the beginning I'm like, why aren't the words coming out? They come out in Spanish, they come out just in whatever goes, and then even just a couple weeks after like regularly outputting, it gets so much easier. It's such a different ball game. Like I'm still not perfect or anything, but it's so different now, and I don't have Spanish or English words come to mind. I either have the Czech word or I just am blanking. So, yeah. Good question. Fisho asks, how should one use crosstalk as a heritage speaker with parents who are both native speakers? And how much value could you get out of it?
Surprised they aren't forcing you to do it already.
Yeah. It's a very interesting topic, actually, why two native speaking parents who don't speak the native language of a country that they're living in well don't end up teaching their kids that language. And it's often on purpose. But anyways, I would say I don't have firsthand experience, but from what I've heard from a lot of people, is that it's very difficult to get your family to really understand what you're trying to do. And I would say, like, if you can have like cross-talk conversations with them every now and then, chat with them like that, and sort of start to slowly train them, that can be great. But it's really, really difficult to make that your primary learning source. If you're expecting them to be your main input method, it's just going to be really, really difficult because they don't really have time. They probably don't really want to, and they probably don't fully understand. This goes for parents, partners, grandparents, pretty much anybody that's in your family that you don't know, like because of the language, I guess. And so just prioritize the person and the relationship with them, and see what you can develop with crosstalk, with chatting with them on their native language and that kind of thing. But make most of your study and like your learning of the language on your own. Do it on your own.
The other thing I would say is if someone is highly proficient in both your native language and their native language, and you're speaking to them in your native language, it is a weird mental gymnastic for them to respond in a different language. It takes practice to do crosstalk effectively.
Definitely.
It's not something that happens immediately. I've tried this a couple of times, and it is just so much more natural to respond in the language that someone is talking to you in. So you kind of have to find somebody who is willing to go through that initial discomfort or mental gymnastics to get to the point where it is comfortable to have that crosstalk conversation. And so they need to understand what it is you're doing and what you're working towards, and that this is a temporary discomfort while they're just acclimating to it. So if you can find someone in your family that is open to this idea and understands the value in it and is willing to like go through that with you, that's awesome. You can absolutely do that with them. But I wouldn't assume that a casual speaker or someone who isn't a language learner and doesn't really have any context for this, and doesn't really I'm not sure if your parents actually care about you speaking the language or not, or learning the language or not. If they do, they may be willing to put in that effort to get into that mindset. But again, they need to understand that it's a temporary mental discomfort while they get used to that.
Absolutely. And then they responded again, said that, yeah, they talk to their dad a lot, and they already do crosstalk with it all the time. Then that
Oh,
sounds like a
great.
great resource, right?
That's awesome.
If
Yeah.
they can get on board with it, and your dad chats with you all the time, absolutely, that sounds fantastic and a great way to connect more with your direct family's heritage, right? It's not
Yeah,
like you're
absolutely.
connecting with your great great grandmother, but like your actual father, which is pretty cool. So,
And
two thumbs up for me.
whenever you get to the point where like comprehension is pretty easy with them, it's like very natural to start responding back in the language. So I think it's if you are having a good experience with that, that's also a perfect way to transition into output whenever you're ready.
Another sort of follow-up question from the Czech rant that I had. Gustavito asks, no, sorry, that's the question after. Leo asks, so in Czech or other Slavic languages, or actually really any highly like synthetic language where there's a lot of changes in the words, do we recommend some kind of Anki rote memorization of genders and declensions and that kind of thing? And so this is a question I'm actively trying to understand and work on and look into. But yes, to some extent. But I'm trying to solve the problem of, instead of just having to memorize all of them, how can I improve my awareness and recognition, and like just to use it more naturally rather than just relying on rote memorization. And the thing that I'm trying to do right now is build some kind of sentence identification practice thing where, instead of like just memorizing that it's conversation is feminine or whatever, I look at a sentence that has the word conversation in it. I got to go, okay, that from context clues is this gender, or it is this declension, it is this XYZ. And that's what I'm playing with right now, trying to figure out how to do that, because I don't think the answer is just memorize it all, because then you train yourself to have to memorize every single word, versus like try to learn the base skill that natives have when they hear a new word for the first time and they recognize that it fits this pattern, so it's almost guaranteed to be a neutral noun or whatever. So
Yeah, I would say studying conjugations and testing yourself and training yourself on using conjugations or declensions in Ben's case is definitely a valuable activity and practice, especially for more complicated constructed languages. What we want to avoid though is over relying on the patterns, the common patterns. Like when I was first learning Spanish, I would literally do a lookup in my head of here's the root word and here is the pattern to convert it into the perspective and the time. Fucking frick, blanking on grammar terms. But like third person past tense like type thing. I would literally like I had the chart in my head and I was like doing the lookup for the pattern to like apply it to the word. You don't want to be doing that. So and I think a lot of people do that when they memorize something.
Exactly, yeah.
And so what we're trying to get to is if you're doing that more rote memorization, what you're actually doing is just practicing using each of them in context, and having an opportunity to practice it yourself and then also notice it in context. And that is definitely a useful activity that we would recommend, especially when you get into the part of output where you're focused on accuracy and making sure that your language is actually sounds more native or sounds more correct, as opposed to earlier when you're just trying to get used to the output process.
We have a couple more quick questions here. Gustavito, I would like you to clarify what you mean by words that just stick out. I don't fully understand that. As you say that as you're immersing, you understand the general plot. It's just that words stick out so much. So if you can clarify that, that'd be helpful for answering your question. Yasser says that they have 1 or 2 months using input and learning a lot of vocabulary, but they feel they understand a good amount, but they feel estancado.
Stuck.
Thank you. So, do you have any advice? And I would say you're probably not doing enough like good intensive immersion, sitting down and trying to expand out of your comfort zone. The metaphor that I've been working with right now is that if things are like coming by you, there's only a certain amount of things that you can grab with your just actual reach, right? You can extend, you can grab things. In the beginning, your arms are very short, right? You can barely get things that are here. They have to be really easy. And then adding a tool in there and sitting down and really trying allows you to take your baseball glove and really extend for something and get something that's far out there, something that you could not do before. And a lot of people fall into the trap of doing the easy free flow because you don't need those fancy tools. You can just grab stuff that's there, but you're not really expanding out beyond your current abilities. And that's where I see a lot of people get estancado. And so if you can push yourself beyond your current abilities with interactive and solid like lookups and really understanding something you could not before, that is almost guaranteed going to unstuck you. That's not how that should be phrased in English. So don't use
Get
that
you
as
unstuck.
your version. Thank you.
Ben's struggling today.
I'm going on vacation tomorrow, so I'm already halfway out the door.
Fair enough. Yeah, making sure that if you're feeling stuck, pushing yourself and doing something that is uncomfortable is the solution to that. Something that feels more challenging and really working through that is the process of getting unstuck. In all areas of life and skill development. Like you really need to push yourself outside of your comfort zone if you want to develop that skill.
Okay, Gustavito clarified. Their question is they're understanding the general plot, but is it okay to ignore certain words that don't that aren't like blocking understanding. They're seeing they're going, okay, I get the general idea of what this conversation is about, but I see 3 words that I don't know, and they're bothering me. They're sticking out to me. They're flashing in red, and they're there. Do you need to look those up? What do you do with that?
Yeah, there's not a right answer or wrong answer here. If you want to look them up, like go ahead and look them up. If there's so many of them that it impedes your ability to actually continue or it like wears down your energy, don't look them up. But if they are sticking out to you and if they are bothering you, that's a good sign that those are actually important to look up because your brain is telling you they are important to look up. If you're getting words that are annoying you every single sentence, then like maybe change that a bit, because that just sounds like you're annoyed by not understanding. And part of the process is just tolerating things you don't understand.
Yeah, I made a video about the 4 learner types, and because we split up like, okay, if you're type 1 learner, then you're okay with things that are simple and things that are a little bit ambiguous. You can kind of learn with whatever content. Types 2 and 3 are if you're okay with one of them but not the other, and then vice versa. And with that, you have to be a little pickier about what content you use, because if you're learning something that's really boring to you, it's harder to learn, or if something's too, or if you're really frustrated by not understanding, it's also really hard to learn. But then type 4 learners are where you really struggle with things that are ambiguous that you don't understand, and you really struggle with things that are too basic, really easy. And if you're a type 4 learner, we basically recommend that you learn to be better at one of those, because it's really, really hard to make good progress if you're type 4 and you don't adapt a little bit. Just because if you're constantly annoyed by not understanding and also can't use basic stuff, it's just very difficult. But most people are in state level type 4 because you go your entire life understanding 99% of everything around you as a human adult. So it kind of makes sense that you learn that.
Yeah. All right. I unfortunately got to go.
Yep, I do too. Cool. Sorry, everybody. If you have more questions, please join the Refold Discord, refold.link/join. Put them in there. We will get to them next time. And we can go into more depth and put them on the screen and everything, like we had bean preparation. So join the Discord.
Prepare the beans.
Prepare the beans. Thank you for being here, Ethan. Thank you for all of you people that tuned in to chat and ask questions. Sorry we didn't get to everything, but we'll
do it next time.
Yeah, we'll do it next time. So we're going to sign off and say goodbye.
Cool beans.
Cool beans. Bean preparation.